All right, welcome back. Welcome everyone to the afternoon session, the first afternoon session of the BRL Conference 2021. So we are kicking off the afternoon with an exciting panel discussion, and this is more on the business engagement side of BRL. So we are talking about smart automation and startups, and it will be moderated by Mark Corderoy, who's sitting there already together with our guest speakers. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the second panel this lunchtime. We're here to discuss the whole area of smart automation and startups, and that's everything from the impact startups can have on an automation landscape, how automation can actually enable startups to create a business for themselves, and how the BRL is able to engage with startups to share its knowledge and experience to make that startup journey more successful or more rapid than can sometimes be the case. So I'm joined by three people today. I have Sam Payne from Open Bionics, Arthur Keeling from Indus 4, and Farid from the Bristol Robotics Laboratory. And what we'll do, we'll kick off by just asking each of them to introduce themselves, say a little bit about their company and their organisation, where they fit into the automation landscape, and then we can start to have a discussion both around the table and also any questions you want to contribute. So we'll start with you, Sam.
Cool, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm the co-founder of Open Bionics. We are a Bristol-based robotics company that manufactures bionic limbs for amputees. We are manufacturing our HQ in Bristol, but we ship bionic arms all over the world. That's our largest market. And automation is important for our startup because it enables us to save costs and pass those cost savings on to our customer. One of the missions of our company is to make bionic limbs as accessible as possible. And one of the biggest barriers to amputees accessing prosthetic limbs is finance. So we can use automation to bring down the cost, make a really expensive bionic technology much cheaper for the people who need it.
Thank you very much. Arthur.
Hi, my name is Arthur Keeling and I'm one of the co-founders of Indus 4. We're based here at FutureSpace and we've been developing a platform to help make automation more accessible for companies. Having experienced some of the pain points of trying to use the tools such as machine vision and augmented reality, we have been working with a number of companies ranging from large pharmaceuticals to food manufacturers to help them access the automation tools that help them improve their operations and have the cost savings that they want as well. And we've been working with people from the NHS as well, helping with the vaccination program and developing products with them to help support that work.
Thank you. And Farid.
Good afternoon. My name is Farid Dailami. I am an associate prof here and I run a unit called Robotics Innovation Facility. Basically, our goal really is to assist, to help, to facilitate anyone's aspiration in terms of robotics and automation, whether you're an individual or whether you're a startup or a micro or a major, doesn't really matter to us. If you have some ideas about automation, about robotics, and you're not quite sure how you would go about that and how you might realize it, we are here to help you. So we will work with you and we will develop the ideas, demonstrate those ideas, and eventually, if possible, implement those ideas. So that's what our role is in this place. We're the out-facing unit within BRL. We tend to deal, as I said, with people outside and look at what they want and how can we help them achieving their goals.
Thank you. And just to complete the set, my name is Mark Corderoy. I am now, I think they've called me the entrepreneur in residence at the University of West of England. I manage a number of the incubators and work very closely with the the hardware incubator within the Bristol Robotics laboratory, which is one of those one of the first incubators a university of this type has sort of developed. And from that incubator, we've developed a whole enterprise zone. I think we have about 85 companies based on campus within the university, which gives us a great sort of opportunity to see organizations of, from literally one-person organizations up to organizations employing 30, 40 people, a bit like Open Bionics did before they left us a year or so ago, probably longer than a year or so ago now. So we get involved with a lot of technology-led startups, and we have quite a unique perspective on the hardware startup, which is something that very few incubation facilities work with. And one of the questions I wanted to put to the panel was, there's this phrase, hardware is hard, when it comes to doing a startup. And I just wanted to, get your views on, what do you think is, where does that difficulty come from your perspective, and how you overcame it, and where you sought help and things like that? Should we start with Sam again? I'll go left to right.
I can relate to hardware being hard. I think that one of the biggest challenges is starting a hardware company and having a hardware startup is just how hungry that organization will be for resource. So you have immediate capital costs, you have machining costs, lots of training costs. You require extraordinary technical talent, which is becoming increasingly expensive, especially when there's a shortage of software engineers and you're competing with Google and Facebook in London. There are many challenges with hardware companies, and I think especially if you are being truly innovative and you're creating an entirely new product or entirely new experience for a customer, there's a lot of education that you have to do. You have to educate the market, you have to educate the buyer, you have to educate your investors. It's really time consuming. And then another problem that you sort of face within hardware is, as I mentioned, the upfront costs. So you have to start fundraising really early. And we don't have in Bristol an incredibly strong investment network. So Bristol is notoriously known for creating amazing startups, but it's actually really, really hard for startups in the city to raise anything above an angel round. So once you've done your angel round, you're looking for your Series A, you're going to have to go to Europe, London, and more likely you're going to have to go to the US, go to the West Coast to get that investment in. So those are some key challenges, but I think the best a hardware company in Bristol is the extraordinary wealth of talent coming out of the universities. You have people coming out of UE and Bristol Uni and Bristol Robotics graduates who are just ready to build amazing companies, build amazing products, and they've got the skill and the talent. It's just we need the ecosystem to, especially with the funding, to support those people to build those products and build those companies.
I think one of the problems with a hardware startup is the idea, investors love this idea of that MVP, that minimum viable product. It's much harder to get to an MVP in a hardware area, and you have all those economies of scale. A part that might cost, £5 if you make 500 of them costs £100 if you make one or two of them, and that happens right at that early stage of a company's history where it doesn't have access to that sort of capital. So I see that all the time in the companies we work with.
We've had that experience as well. It's very challenging, and would echo quite a few of the points just raised. You're not sat in a room with a few people writing lines of code on a laptop, and that's all you need when you're doing an app. And as soon as you start needing machine tools or access to drills, CNC equipment, you start to become quite reliant on local machine shops helping you, or 3D printing facilities to help you. 3D printers nowadays, there are some cheap, but if you want to start doing anything with something like Formlabs, you're spending thousands of pounds on equipment, whereas software companies are spending money on their laptop and they can do everything very remotely, and hardware's startups require a physical space, and that's something that definitely we've experienced at the Bristol Robotics Lab. They've been trying to provide that through the hardware incubator.
And I think it goes alongside the people as well. If you have a software company and you start to scale early on, you almost start to clone your technical founder. Whereas with a hardware company, you suddenly need an electronics engineer, a mechatronics engineer, a software engineer, a mechanical engineer. So instead of scaling building a team of 4 people, you've got one person in each department, and you still have the limitations of not being able to scale in the way the software company would have done. So it's how you balance those resources. Yeah. Mm-hmm. These are problems that you must have come across with companies you've worked. Because I know you work with very early stage companies as well as more established companies, and this is one of the things that the RIF was set up to help with, wasn't it? To sort of plug that gap.
Yes. We are there to essentially address the hardware needs as well as the software needs. I think hardware has always been difficult. It's just that now we have a comparison with software, and we say, oh yeah, it's hard, because we're trying to if you like, gauge it against doing apps and that sort of thing. But hardware has always been difficult. Hardware has never been something that you can easily get into. In some ways, we're a bit more fortunate now because we've got rapid prototyping. So a lot of the stuff that normally would take quite a while to do from metal now is a lot quicker doing it out of plastic, at least to show people what the physical item might look like or what the mechanism might look like. And then if we're happy, then we can start to transfer it into metal. So in some ways, I think the tools available now are beginning to impact that hardware element of the difficulties with that. Gradually, we'll be getting to have solutions which are, but that one itself also brings in other difficulties and other misconceptions, because there are things that you can do in rapid prototyping using plastics and rapid multi-layer manufacture. And then when you come to actually make it out of metal, you find out that, no, that cannot be the solution. So there are some elements that we need to be careful of, but there are new solutions that are helping us as well.
Sam, I'm interested in, your company made a lot of use of this 3D additive technology in the early days. Is that something you see as remaining an ongoing core capability, or do you see you move past that into other technologies?
No, we're still using additive manufacturing. We're now using SLS too. I think it will stay as long as it's providing great cost benefit, great speed benefit to build the product for our customers, robust products, and the materials are still innovating, so we're still getting more and more interesting materials that you can 3D print with. Our product relies on us being able to 3D print flexible, durable, soft on skin liners that are worn on the skin. So these are really sensitive materials that we need. So as long as the material innovation and the 3D printing additive manufacturing innovation can continue, I don't see why it won't remain a core capability of ours. And I think it's an amazing skill for a company to have, because we are essentially working out how to build products at a huge scale that are completely bespoke. So no product is the same. This isn't like injection molding. Every single product that comes out of Robotics is completely unique. And I think we're the only company in the world that's figured out how to mass manufacture like this.
That's very, very exciting. I mean, I think the idea of mass production, but having every product being different, is something that a lot of people try to get their heads around, and that's a really difficult thing to get your head around. And it opens up, as you've discovered, it's opened up markets that traditionally weren't well enough served, and it gives you that edge in the market. So it's a really good example of how sort of technology can help a market and help your position in the market. But there still is that transition, isn't there? I mean, I know, Arthur, you've been building prototypes and cutting metal as well as 3D printing, and there are only certain things there's only so far you can take 3D printing, isn't there? But there reaches a point where you're trying to put forces and loads and speeds through things.
You can't use plastic.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been working, and one of our challenges to try and make hardware sort of easier is actually working with some of the largest investors in R&D in Europe. We've been working with them and actually partnering with companies to go out and develop products with them, and they have access to sort of resources, but small startups have that speed and can start to tackle the challenges and make hardware easier, because we can move at speed that large companies can't by using 3D printing. But when you start putting forces through it, metal is required, definitely. I mean, when we're starting to use ultrasonic blades to cut things, there's a limit to what you can do there, and there is still a cost associated. But that's where we've been working with partners in the R&D space to develop that.
And that's an area that we want to maybe go into more and more, which is metallic additive layer manufacturing, because we will then have the capability to carry forces and torques using metals, but we will have the flexibility of also making components with that process out of metals which are much more durable and much more capable. And that, I think, is something that we're going to see more and more of.
Indeed.
And this doesn't just apply to mechanical engineering, it's the same with computer boards, PCBs, and the control boards that you need to have. You have that same one-off problem compared to...
Correct. As
you start to militarize, which I suspect is an issue with prosthetic limbs, you have a physical envelope, everything's got to fit inside. Miniaturizing becomes quite expensive in its own right, because you have to start investing in different types of multi-layer technologies and things like that. So I have a question for you, Sam, that's come through, which is, what do you see as the next steps needed to push out the sorts of products and then disseminate what you're doing in your market? How do you see that happening? And
that's a fantastic question, and I think I'm hoping, I don't know how many people are viewing this, but I'm hoping lots of students who are building companies are viewing this, because one thing that I think we really underestimated as a company, as a robotics and a hardware company, where the vast majority of our team were engineers, technical talent. And I saw it in the peer companies that I was working alongside at the very beginning when we were all starting our companies. We all kind of made the same mistake, and that was we didn't invest enough in marketing and communication when we should have, because it's all very well building a truly innovative, inventive product that just changes lives. But if people don't know about your product, if they don't know that the product exists, you've invented it for nothing. And this is one of the key challenges we're facing at the moment. We're a tiny company, and we're in Bristol, and our largest market is in the US, and we don't have a physical presence in the US at the moment. We've got a team of 3 in the US, and so we're just now trying to approach this challenge of how do you mass communicate that you've invented this thing when you're changing so much about the product. So the bionic arm that we've invented, the Hero arm, uses all kinds of new materials. There's a lot of misinformation out there around what a 3D printed hand is, what 3D printers can do, can they even make healthcare standard products? They can, but there's loads of misinformation out there that we have to combat, and we have to gain a lot of consumer confidence. So the next step for us, for truly making a massive worldwide impact, is communicating that the product exists, and communicating really well that it's a medical product, it's heavily regulated, it's gone through all kinds of standards and testing, and that it's available for people. And then after that, the challenge that we've been working on since day one is just how do we continually bring down the price of the product? So we've definitely created the most affordable multi-grade bionic can that's ever been available. But how do we make it even more affordable? Because even with it currently being the most affordable, it's still not affordable enough for everyone in the world. And that's kind of the point of our company. It's everyone should have access to the technology. It shouldn't be about your wealth.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real sort of ethical dilemma, isn't it? That you want everyone to have the benefits of the technology, and you've got to somehow work out whether it's working with people like the NHS or the states or different organisations, how that could happen. But it's interesting what you said about sort of regulation, because I remember sitting in a meeting with Arthur where they were delighted to be told they're not a regulated product. So simply from a cost point of view, you started developing a product at the start of the vaccination program, which really demonstrates, I think, how the current sort of robotic tech or automation technology can produce product very, very quickly when the needs must. I mean, do you want to?
We were speaking with doctors working on the vaccination program and helping them work with what's called MDV, so multi-dose vials. And in healthcare, it's the safest way to transport medicine around, but it's quite a time-consuming process to be removing it. But there's also a factor of ensuring safety and reliability of getting the medicine out, and obviously automated tools help resolve some of those issues. But because we were not touching the medicine or doing anything with it ourselves, we weren't a medical device. And I imagine at Open Bionics, working in the US and the UK and globally, the sort of regulatory challenges have been huge. I mean, we were lucky because we approached them and got told we weren't a medical device. But I know that the challenges and the work that has to go into it's huge.
But going back to where we started, Sam, you're right. Getting the message out there requires a lot of effort and requires funds. We find that all the time within RIF. But we have something that can be of service to many, many people, but getting that message out there is very, very hard. It's very difficult to attract people to what facilities you have, what capabilities you have. And unfortunately, more often than not, we don't address that at the beginning. We somehow come to that conclusion way in and find out that there are no means of providing the marketing. So it's very important right at the very beginning to start to address the questions of how do we make ourselves known out there so that people know about what we can do.
I've got a question that takes us into a completely different direction here, but maybe we're coming towards the end. But this is about the home of the startup, Silicon Valley. Why haven't any big robotics companies come out of Silicon Valley, and why aren't the AI companies investing in robotics? There seems to be two worlds that don't really meet at the moment.
Well, in some ways, why don't the AI companies? Well, one of them did. Google went into a robotics company.
Yeah.
And then they decided, no, this wasn't quite where they wanted to be, so they withdrew. So I think it's early days. I think gradually we will see people getting in and getting mixed up, and either some from robotics industry will go into AI and vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's quite early days. We need to give it a little bit more time for it to mature and for AI applications to become very useful in terms of robotics. And at the moment, the AI that we are using is machine learning, which requires millions of examples, and getting hold of those and applying them to robotics still a challenge, but it will happen. It will happen.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting about your company, Arthur, is you do have hardware and software, and I think you're right that there is going to be an evolution of companies that have a foot in both camps.
Yes.
But we're right at the start of that process.
That's it. And I think particularly with the Silicon Valley, the easier route has been scaling software as a service platforms, and for investors that's been a really easy place to invest money because they can see the opportunity. But with companies like Open Bionics demonstrating you can build bespoke products and produce them at scale as well, and that's where we're working with companies as Indus 4 to build a platform to enable people to access the automation tools. But it is starting to blur the lines between the physical world and the cyber world, and bringing them together for companies to make it useful, but also something that they can scale internally. And it's sort of slightly an eat the elephant moment. The automation challenge is huge, and you've got to do it bit at a time.
So, Sam, what's next for Open Bionics? Are you obviously I'm sure there's confidential things you can't talk about, but I mean, do you have plans for other types of limbs, prosthetics, and things like that?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we're working on, and there's a lot coming up for us at the moment. One of the key goals is to continue bringing the price down, and one of the ways in the pandemic that we found that we could do this is actually by not just being a manufacturer. So previously, Open Bionics, the beginning of last year, Open Bionics was just a manufacturer of bionic limbs. Like, we design and build these bionic limbs, they're bespoke, and then we send them out to a B2B clinic that's outside of our organization. And what we found was, whilst we could recommend what the price point of the AOM should be, actually we've got no control at the point of the clinic. So as soon as the customer goes to a clinic, we have no control over the pricing. So during the pandemic, we decided to launch our own clinic. So we now have a clinic in Bristol. We see our own patients, and every single day we get to interact with MPTs, people who are wearing our devices, and we're working with them directly. So that's been like an amazing change for us. We swapped from a B2B company to a direct consumer company, especially the young children who are getting their first year off around the age of 8 years old, and we're seeing them come back to get their upgrades. It's going to be a really fun time for us. And in terms of other products, the mission of Open Bionics is to create any type of assistive technology that can improve your quality of living or your mobility, your level of independence. And we've got 2 products in development, in the very early stages of development, that we're keen to bring to market, fingers crossed. All within assistive devices that help the human body, improve the experience of the human body. So yeah, we're really excited about where we are at the moment.
I think we are coming to the last 1 or 2 minutes of the session. Is there, I mean, what would you want to say to a startup? How would you want to encourage a startup if technology was involved in their new business?
Currently, there are lots of opportunities. A startup needs to have the right people, the right mix of people, in order to use these opportunities that are available. To me, at the moment, maybe that is far more important than having the right technology, is getting the right mix of people together. And when we do see startups with the right mix of people, you can see them, that synergy between the people actually enables them to grow very fast. And that's what we need to see more and more of. Sam said that this area is very blessed, well blessed, with having high-tech people around. That's what we need to do, is to give those people opportunities for us to have our own Silicon Valley version, but maybe in hardware, maybe start addressing those needs.
Closing thoughts, Arthur?
Well, I think we are a younger company than that of Open Bionics, and are going through some of those sort of early challenges of growing a team, finding the right talent, and developing our relationships with our customers at this stage. And as we're growing, we are experiencing issues of access to equipment, growing a team, and the challenges of being a young startup working with customers. And trying to fill that.
That very neatly brings us back, I think, to where we actually started, which was getting the right talent. And one of the things the BRL does is produce those sort of multifaceted engineers, electronics, mechanical, vision, AI, which are so badly needed for companies like yourselves. So I think that's probably the greatest thing that we can do almost is keep that supply of talent into this community. So this end of the M4 gets known for this. Maybe we'll leave the fintech for other parts of the M4.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much for joining and sharing your thoughts over the last half hour. And I think it's time to hand back to the next session.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. Thanks for chairing this session, Mark, and thank you to our speakers, and thank you to the audience for the questions. So we are closing this session now. Thank you.